I was looking at the viewfinder and I was like, this shit is not in focus at all. And then I realized that I just didn't have my glasses on. So, very smart of myself, huh? Let me take these off because they are nasty. Nasty. Hi, hello, how's it going? It's Lo. If my hair looks weird today, that's because I was self-isolating today. And the reason why I was self-isolating, if you follow me on Twitter, you do know that I had a wild week at work this week, which included A, going to a union election meeting, B, almost getting punched, C, having to call the cops, and D, being exposed to COVID. So, you know, I was locked inside my room for a couple of days, but my test came out negative today. So, you know, I don't have COVID. Yay! Today's video is going to be a little bit different. The majority of you know, and I think that this is common knowledge at this point, that I am a feminist bitch. I love feminism. I love talking about feminism at any given opportunity. I'm just a feminist hoe, you know. I just vibe with it a lot. However, something that you guys may not know about me is that I absolutely detest International Women's Day. The reason why I don't like International Women's Day, and whenever I celebrate it, I prefer to call it 8M, is because I feel like it has become celebratory for the wrong reasons. I feel like it has become commodified, and I feel like it has become performative. Particularly this day, I am warning Marielle Franco that, you know, we're going on the 3rd anniversary of her execution, and we still don't know who ordered her killing. We still don't know who benefited from her death. I am warning Breonna Taylor and many other Black women who have either died or lost their children and their loved ones at the hands of police brutality. I am warning the thousands upon thousands of women who have been lost to COVID, either working as frontline workers, either working as care workers, or either killed by their partners or husbands or, you know, family members in domestic violence and femicide throughout the lockdown and stay-at-home orders. Femicide is a huge issue in Latin America, and each passing day I feel like I just keep seeing more and more women dying because of femicide, and it just makes me think, like, are we supposed to be celebrating anything? I swear to God, when I started this channel, I was really like, I'm not going to talk about politics. I already talk about politics on my day-to-day life. I'm just going to talk about the shitty porn that I read. I'm quite uncomfortable with doing 8M in a way that feels performative. And I mean, everyone contributes to the struggle in their own way, but I feel like I myself have to do something a little bit more. Giving all of that, and since I'm trapped at home and I'm not looking forward to another COVID exposure because one was already, you know, very difficult on my mental health, I decided to celebrate International Women's Day as I could, and the way that I'm going to do this is by listing the 8 feminist books that have completely shaped me as a feminist. Much like the Black Theory books, I am going to go over the list individually, and I'm going to explain what they mean to me and why they're important and the ideas that they talk about the most. If you are a person who just came around feminism and you're just, you know, feeling your way around theory, I have a video in my channel that I'm going to link in the cards up above with a Feminist 101 explaining like the origin of feminist thought, feminist waves, and giving a little bit more contextualized readings into the feminist movement and feminist theory as a whole. However, in that video, I don't really get into the books specifically, I just list them, and in this video, I'm going to list a little bit of the books that have mattered to me the most throughout the years. So, without further ado, let's get started. So the first book on this list is this one. This is The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. Basically the OG fairy tale retelling. This is not a theory book per se, but it's theory adjacent, I feel, because this was so important for feminist literary movements and feminist literary scholarship when it came out. I think it came out like really early, like 1979. It's actually like pretty old, but this book basically it's a retelling of fairy tales in a feminist way, basically exploring the ways in which like fairy tales, traditional fairy tales, were usually concocted and conceived as ways to be used as cautionary tales for little girls. And the idea was that these cautionary tales would be used to like keep girls in their own path and keep girls in their own lane. And you know, I think there is no example more obvious than, for instance, Little Red Riding Hood, that, you know, the girl literally is not meant to stray from her path, and when she does, there's a wolf and shitty things happen to her. And I think that the idea of the Bloody Chamber is precisely to kind of like what happens when you go off the beaten path, what happens when you don't do what people tell you to do. Like, the retelling of literal Red Riding Hood in this is absolutely amazing. There is a lot of exploration of kind of like an erotic feeling also behind this. There's a lot that has been written about the Bloody Chamber, and I feel like if you're into fairy tale retellings and feminist fairy tale retellings, this is absolutely amazing. My favorite story in this book is called The Earl King. Basically, the Earl King is about a girl who finds the Earl King in the woods, and the Earl King has a wall in his hut that is filled with birds in cages. And the birds in cages are the women that he has trapped before. And she kind of knows that in order for her to free herself and to get out of there alive, and to free the other women, she has to kill him. But the guy is kind of hot. So there is this one part in the Earl King. I have the Brazilian one, but I really needed the English edition because of one sentence, one line. And that line is this one: "The Earl King will do you grievous harm." And then she kills him. It's great. Like, I'm not advocating for violence against your abusers, but, you know, he had it coming. Basically, The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter is an amazing place to start if you want to start with feminist retellings and if you want to experiment a little bit more with feminist literary fiction. I know this is not theory per se, but this is a great place to start. Oh, this one's going to take a lot of my time. The next book on my list is this one. This is Caliban and the Witch by Silvia Federici. As you can see, this is one of my favorites just because of the sheer amount of tabs that I've put into it. Caliban and the Witch. Man, what can I say about this book? First things first, the edition. Brazilian edition. Always killing. Like, this is so fucking pretty and so fucking good. And I feel like this book deserves it so much because this book is so fucking relevant. Caliban and the Witch has a subtitle that is Women, Body, and Primitive Accumulation. And primitive accumulation is a Marxist concept of the first grabbing of private property. And this can be exemplified, and it is very exemplified, and especially in Silvia Federici's book. She uses this example a lot of the enclosures. Enclosures were the first process of delimiting private property and to actually literally putting a fence around what was common property and saying, like, this is mine. And if you want to take this, you know, want to use what is in here, either you pay me or I will fucking kill you. This is what Silvia Federici is examining in this moment. And what she argues here, and I think this argument is absolutely brilliant, is that it isn't that witch burnings were the dying breath of a failed, you know, primitive and backwards system that were the Middle Ages. In fact, witch burning and the burning of the rebel body that were the heretics at the time was actually the first step towards primitive accumulation, because you not only needed the control of the land, you needed the control of these women. Women were the ones who are able to, you know, create and raise and give birth to the labor force. So if capitalism was supposed to be successful in its primitive accumulation, which that is, you know, this first process of taking of this wealth, taking of this income, and taking of this capital, then the female body needed to be enclosed as well. And this is what she argues, is that, you know, with the enclosing of women's bodies as witches burning, basically what we're doing here is that we're enclosing women's ability to have a sexual freedom, we're enclosing women's ability to dispose over their own bodies, and basically we're enclosing women's ability to control the labor force production. So if women are to be taught to be afraid of their own bodies, afraid of talking to other women, afraid of being branded a witch. And, you know, a witch has many names throughout history. She can be a witch, she can be hysteric, she can be a whore, she can be a harlot, she can be many things. But mainly she is a woman who defies the rule. And a woman who defies the rule is sent to the pyre. And, you know, in a way, the pyres never stopped burning. The pyres were the diagnosis of hysteria. The pyres are the slut shamings, the vengeance porn aspects. There is a lot in the modern society that still is a pyre, that's still meant to keep us in this place. The argument that she makes here is very simple. Like, you need to control the reproductive body. And it doesn't matter how you control this. You need to control the body in a way that it gives you the amount of a labor force that you need. And this process that carries on to this day, she argues, began with the witch burnings in the 16th century. So there is no such thing as the Middle Ages being backwards and superstitious and burning women. And, you know, so we're so glad that we're over this now, and capitalism is so better than that. It isn't. Capitalism was forged precisely because witches were burned. So this book is absolutely fucking incredible. It's one of my absolute favorite books of all time, as you can see, again, by the tabs. I use this on my thesis all the fucking time, and it's basically one of the best things that I've read when it comes to feminist theory, so I highly, highly, highly recommend Caliban and the Witch. She has another book, actually. It's, I think it's, in English, it's Revolution at Ground Zero. This cover is also very fucking pretty, but I don't like this one as much. I can go into it in another video, but, you know, if you have to read a Silvia Federici book, read Caliban and the Witch. It's way, way, way better, and I feel like it's more cohesive than this one. This is just a collection of essays, even though it's very fucking pretty, but yeah. The next book on my list is Ain't I a Woman by Bell Hooks. This book is quite similar to Women Raised in Class by Angela Davis in the way that it examines feminism relation to Black women and how Black women have been affected by gender. Women Raised in Class stops right at the beginning of the 20th century. Like, it stops its analysis of Black women in the feminist movement right around that time. But Ain't I a Woman by Bell Hooks actually goes all the way up to the 1970s. So it's actually spans longer. And also Women Raised in Class offers a class analysis. So Angela Davis looks a little bit into the workers' movement that also included white immigrant women, something that Bell Hooks' book doesn't really looks a lot into. If you're wondering, okay, so which one of those should I read? Both. You should read both. Both of them are incredible, and both of them need to be read. The title of Ain't I a Woman comes from a speech by an abolitionist, a very famous abolitionist called Sojourner Truth. Basically, she was invited to speak at a women's conference, and a man took the mic because why not? And said that women shouldn't get the right to vote or for the right to political participation because women were fragile, dainty creatures that needed help to do everything and couldn't handle the hard, difficult stuff of politics, which, you know, bullshit. And basically, Sojourner Truth's speech was like, I was a slave, I was enslaved for a long time, I saw the majority of my children being sold into slavery, I saw a lot of shit and experienced a lot of shit, and I was whipped and I was beaten and I needed to carry cotton, and I a woman? Like, am I not a woman? And basically, like, this is very central for Black feminism and also for feminism in general because it explains a lot on how, you know, different aspects will modify a woman's experience. There is a little bit of contentiousness on whether or not this speech actually happened, and if it did, if it happened in those terms, because a lot of it doesn't really match with Sojourner Truth's biography, but at the same time, it is a relevant aspect of Black women's feminism to the point where it was the title of Bell Hooks' book. So Ain't I a Woman is actually a very deep exploration of Black womanhood and Black feminism and the ways in which, for instance, Black women were integrated into the civil rights movement and how, you know, what kind of participation they had within those civil rights movements, within the Reconstruction, within the abolitionist movement. So it's actually very interesting, and I think it's a very integral part of feminist scholarship and feminist education to be able to look at things like Black feminism and understand the incredible contribution that they have made for feminism as a whole, and how Black women are systematically erased from feminist history when in fact they were responsible for the vast majority of it. So yeah, highly, highly recommend. The next book in the list is this one. This is Undoing Gender by Judith Butler. I will admit this is not a beginner-friendly book. However, this is one of my absolute favorite books of all times. This is the Brazilian edition. This was the first queer theory and feminist theory book that I've ever bought in my entire life. I bought this in 2015, the first feminist congress that I attended, the feminist conference that I attended. And basically, Gender Trouble, Judith Butler will elaborate on her theory that is, gender is performative. And what does it mean for us to say that gender is performative? It means that gender is not something that you have, that you possess. Gender is something that you do, and you constantly do your own gender. Like, if you wake up in the morning and you put a certain set of clothes and you act a certain way and you talk a certain way, all of that consolidates an impression of a gender. And it's not something that you have within yourself. It's something that you consolidate this impression. And therefore, no one really is a gender from the start, but we're all actually constantly consolidating this idea of gender in order to be intelligible in what she calls the heterosexual matrix. This overlay and conjunction of rules that forces us into cisgenderism and that also forces us into heterosexuality. And in fact, she argues that we live every day in like this contentious relation with those rules, and those contentious relations with those needs, cultural and normative, to fit in a certain mold. It was a ride trying to understand this, but now 7-8 years down the line, this is finally something that I think has become quite staple in my feminist background and in my feminist chest of things. And this is a book that has become very formative in myself when I think about gender and the ways that I do my own gender. I am a cisgender woman, but, there are ways in which you do your own gender to consolidate certain impressions. And what she argues in this and that is that we have certain ways of doing gender that disrupts sort of society as it is. For instance, I particularly take a lot of pleasure of working in a very male profession that is law and dressing very hyper feminine and still demanding respect. So forcing men to respect that which they do not respect at all, which is femininity. So this book really clarified this for me. And it's actually one of the best things that I've read. So I know that this is not beginner friendly and this is very difficult, but at the same time, it's a book that I highly, highly recommend. Ooh, the Harry and Meghan interview is going on and my timeline is getting wild. So the next book on my list is Sexing the Body by Fausto-Sterling. This book is a little bit different because it's not necessarily a social theory book. It's a biologist's outlook on gender, and you might listen to this and go like, yikes, no, don't want that, but it's actually quite different. Basically, what Fausto-Sterling argues in Sexing the Body is that people who claim that the gender binary is natural are actually confounding or deliberately misleading the natural for the normal, because the natural thing in the human body is not the gender binary at all. The formation of a gender and the formation of sex as a biological data is way more complex than just, the gender binary and just the sexual binary. There are many factors that go into the formation of a gender, and sometimes those factors don't align in what you would consider a cohesive gender identity. So there is a lot that goes into this, and Fausto-Sterling does an amazing job to really trace biologically and also historically how what we understand as a gender binary and what we understand today as being a woman and being a man is something that is profoundly historically contingent and something that is very dependent upon culture to really come up as something cohesive. So her argument is this is A+, amazing, incredible. It's an amazing way to start thinking on gender, and just to stand up against transphobes who say, this is not natural, this is not natural. You might think that this is not normal, but the human body is not so easily categorized. Those two categories are a product, and her biologist's idea are a product of cultural understandings and cultural definitions. So it's an amazing book, A+, incredible, and I highly, highly recommend. I don't recommend engaging with transphobes because why. But at the same time, it really gives you a closer idea from a biologist's point of view that, yeah, sure, gender is something that is culturally contingent, culturally made, and it's not the same thing, and it has not been the same thing throughout history. And people who say that transgender people, gender non-conforming people are unnatural are actually want to say that they are not normal, and the normal being the cultural conceptions of what gender should be. So A+ book, really recommended, really amazing. So the next book is Women, Culture, and Politics by Angela Davis. Yeah, I know, I gave women race and class a rest. Basically, Women, Culture, and Politics is a simpler quote marks, book is more of a collection of essays. Those essays are based on speeches and lectures that she herself has given. It's actually quite cute. In the beginning of the book, she says that the idea came from her mother. Like, her mother saw her working on a speech for a graduating class in Berkeley, and her mother was like, you should publish that. And she was like, yeah, I should. And then she eventually did. So I thought that was pretty wholesome. In Women, Race, and Politics, there are speeches and lectures and, opening ceremony types of keynote speaker things that Angela Davis has given throughout her life, and especially in other countries that are not the United States. And I would particularly like to see something that she has said in Brazil. I've seen a couple of her lectures in Brazil, and all of them are incredible and amazing. It's also very interesting because she was friends with Lélia Gonzalez, who is a major Brazilian feminist thinker. The last time that she was here, she was like, y'all don't need me. Y'all have Lélia Gonzalez. They were really close friends. Unfortunately, Lélia Gonzalez left us in the 90s. But I think that she is a woman who takes great care in localizing her own activism and to giving really a platform and amplifying the voices of women in the global south. I think the last time that I saw an interview of Angela Davis, she had a Marielle Franco portrait on her shelves, and I thought that this was a very nice touch, and I felt really seen at that moment, and I really admire Angela Davis. So yeah, I strongly suggest Women, Culture, and Politics. So the next book on the list is The Sexual Contract by Carole Pateman. If you have studied social theory, I don't know how this is treated abroad. We usually study this in history class, but if you studied social theory at all, you know that there was a time in political history that the contractualist philosophers came up. And basically those were people who would argue that society is formed out of a contract, a social contract, you can call. This contract was basically men, and I say men because no one was talking about women at that time, agreed to form a society. There was a really fun meme about Rousseau and Hobbes about, the state of nature and the good men and the corruption of society. A+ philosophical meme. Basically, men will agree with each other to give their power to a centralized unit. And from that centralized unit to become the state, and then that state, which only exists because men agree to, will control life. Basically, what Carole Pateman argues in The Sexual Contract is that, yeah, men did that, but no one asked women about it. And therefore, the result is that women are also a part of the contract, but it's not the social contract, it's the sexual contract. It's the way that women are subjected to men within the social contract. I don't particularly like contractualist views on feminism, but this has served me well, not in the philosophical thesis, academia type of way. I use this a lot at work. I have quoted The Sexual Contract so many times in my case filings and, my petitions to the court and all that, because it is very useful when you're thinking about the framework of how the state works. You're thinking about, how women are excluded of that. If you're thinking about the framework of the state and the compulsory exclusion of women, then we're definitely 100% thinking about the sexual contract and, how women were systematically excluded from the discussions on the formation of the state. This is clear in the French Revolution and whatnot. So the sexual contract was really, really, really useful for me in my work. Not necessarily something that I am drawn to in terms of theory, but I do think that this is an amazing read and it definitely must read. Finally, I could not wrap this video up about feminist readings without including what my dad gave to me on International Women's Day when I was 16, and that is this bad boy right here. This is The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir. A chunker. This is chunky, but this is a must-read for feminist thinking. The questions that Simone de Beauvoir poses here are questions that feminists are still struggling to answer to this day. So, for instance, when Simone de Beauvoir said that one is not born, but rather becomes a woman, a lot of feminists to this day, including intersectional feminists, are still like, what does she mean with becomes a woman? And that kind of sets the stage for so much feminist questioning. I think that it was so symbolic of my dad to give me this when I was 16 and still fumbling around with feminist theory on International Women's Day. I will allow one man rights, and that man is my dad. My dad is a commie too, so I wouldn't expect anything else of him. Again, I've said this so many times, but if you are, intimidated by the chunkness of this, read just the introduction. It's definitely a good place to start, and it sets a really interesting baseline for feminist thought. What do feminists think and what do feminists investigate in their research? The introduction to the second sex to this day. Like, the issues that she states here are more developed and are more thought about, but are essentially the same since 1947. Even though this chunker was written in 1947, I feel like there's so many things that she wrote in here that still resonate with me to this day, and that still resonate with many women to this day, including one of my absolute favorite quotes of all time. We will not let ourselves be intimidated by the number and violence of attacks against women, nor be fooled by the self-serving praise showered on the real woman, not be won over by men's enthusiasm for her destiny, a destiny they would not for the world want to share. Anyways, this was the video. These were the recommendations that I had for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you will pick one of them up. And again, International Women's Day is a day for struggle, and it's a day for, celebrating how far we've come and recognizing how far we still have to go. Like I said in my feminist theory video, it's not just that we got the vote, that suddenly women's plight for political inclusion is done. There's still a lot of work to be done. And a lot of things to do still, a lot of places that we still need to feminize our thought and feminize ourselves and feminize, our way of thinking. And there's just so much that we still need to address. Probably will do a video on decolonial feminists later on this month. And the problem with decolonial feminism is that the majority of the women that I love and the majority of the women that I read, like Maria Lugones, like Ochi Curiel, like Lelia Gonzalez, are not translated into English. The majority of them are in Portuguese and or English. So we'll see. I'll see how it works. But I do think that decolonial feminism is something that people would need to read. And again, a reminder, in March 8th, fuck your flowers, fuck your chocolates, fuck your well wishes. I just want to be alive. And this is my struggle. I want to live, I want to thrive, and I want to be the best version of myself in a world that will allow me to thrive as a human being, not just exist, but really live. Happy International Women's Day, happy 8M, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!